Hey guys, welcome back. So with the Madam Web movie trailer dropping today and showing us that Ezekiel Sims is going to be either the bad guy or the anti-good guy, I don't know, because they always changing something. But after seeing that, I was like, yo, when I get home, I'm just gonna do a quick video for you guys where we cover the full story of Ezekiel Sims, go over his origin, as well as him teaching Peter how his own powers actually work, to where from there we'll talk about the big plot twist that showed us who Ezekiel Sims really was all along. So if you came here expecting a trailer breakdown, where I'm slowing stuff down and freezing frames talking about how Ezekiel's nose hairs connect to the web of life and destiny, nah, this ain't that. And nothing against that, because I've definitely done videos like that before. But for this one, I just felt like sitting down and having a talk with you guys about what's in the comics. So expect the format of this video to be much like most of the other 1,000 videos on this channel, as far as the format goes. But with that said, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so Ezekiel Sims practically has all the same abilities as Peter Parker's Spider-Man on a 1-to-1 scale. Same strength, speed, agility, wall crawling, spider sense, you name it. And as far as why it is 1-to-1, we'll talk about in a little bit. But before we do, first we gotta talk about his origin and the events that drew him towards Peter Parker, as well as the meaning behind it. Cause starting with his origin, Ezekiel Sims initially got his abilities after saving a spider temple from being torn down by government bulldozers, and in return he requested that the keeper of this temple do a ritual that would grant him the powers of a Spider-Totem. But regardless of Ezekiel being warned not to do this, and informed by the keeper of the risks that would come along with taking this power, cause the keeper told him, if you take from the spider that is not yours to take, one day a price will be asked in return, cause to this generation there is one chosen. You are not that one. But even still, with hearing this, Sims insisted that the keeper goes through with it, while telling him that the reward is worth the risk. Which at the time seemed like the risk was he could die in the process, but it was much deeper than that. And after this, for the years that would follow, Ezekiel Sims used these abilities to accumulate a great deal of wealth, and along the way he joined the Spider Society, which is a group that worships totemic spider deities like Shathra, the Great Weaver, the Gatekeeper, so on and so forth. And on top of that, he created a company called Web Corps, which for the most part would operate as a front for what he was really doing with his money, which we'll talk more about through the course of this. But in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2, Issue 30, it's here where we got his first appearance, as he just popped up on Spider-Man, calling him by his government name, as if they was cool like that. But there was a few things that happened here, cause for one, not only did we see right off the bat that Ezekiel Sims knew Peter Parker's identity, but secondly, it was also here where Peter realized, even though this guy looked twice his age, he was just as fast as Peter. And the third thing that is the most important is that it was here where Ezekiel Sims asked Peter a question that from this day forward would change everything we knew about the source of Spider-Man's powers. Because Ezekiel asked him, did the radiation enable the spider to give you these powers? Or was the spider trying to give you these powers before the radiation killed it? Which at the time had Peter stuck, because he was like, well, I assumed it was a radioactive spider, and that's how I got powers. But throughout this conversation, Ezekiel asked Peter, had he seen the spider before? Did he do an autopsy on the spider? And Peter was stuck. He was just like, no, and no, he ain't had no answers. Which at the time for Peter, this question felt like a punch to the gut. Cause it's very much like a chicken or the egg kind of thing. Cause if your belief system's already established and you build everything in your life on top of that, only for someone to come along and shake up the foundation, then at that point you questioning the whole building, everything that comes after. And that's where Peter was at the time. But Ezekiel just told him that's enough for tonight, as he dropped off the building and just disappeared, leaving Peter's head all kinds of messed up, with him trying to figure out the true answer to that $5 million question that he was asked by someone who had the same 1-to-1 abilities as him. But from here, Peter wouldn't see Ezekiel Sims for some time, which I believe at the time was like a couple days or so. It wasn't nothing crazy. Because they first spoke in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2, Issue 30, and Ezekiel Sims came back to Peter 2 issues later in Issue 32. But just before we get into that, I do also want to mention at the end of Issue 31, it was here where we got the big reveal of Peter getting a job at Midtown High School, which was his old high school, as their new science teacher. But in the next issue, Issue 32, on Peter's first day, Ezekiel Sims just popped up, giving Midtown High School a $100,000 donation for new science equipment. And the crazy thing is, like $100,000 back in 2001 would be like giving $170-something thousand in 2023. Just to give you an idea of how crazy inflation is. But nonetheless, this was really Ezekiel creating the opportunity for him and Peter to continue their conversation, because it's been established that Ezekiel knows more about Peter's powers than he knows about them himself. So at first, Peter's more or less like, what, you gonna tell me I can talk to spiders or something? And Ezekiel's like, have you tried? And so Peter gives it a shot, he talks to a spider, and nothing happens, because it don't work like that. But he then goes on to teach Peter about totems, and for the most part Ezekiel keeps it fairly simple, and mainly because this is the introduction, and most of this will be built upon in stories like Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon in the years to come. But Ezekiel starts out by telling Peter that many years ago, when the world was new, great forces walked the earth, who bridged the gap between humans and other species. And these great forces were your totem deities, and they're the ones responsible for giving people like Peter the ability to bridge the gap between spider and man. And he goes on to let Peter know that he's not the first to have these totemistic powers. They go back to the dawn of time. And Ezekiel goes on to let Peter know that there are other totems aside from the Spider-Totem, and Peter's fought some of them, though he may not be aware of it. Because much like Captain America's enemies are the Red Skull and Baron Zemo, Magneto's enemies with the X-Men, and Thor goes back and forth with Loki, these opposing ends share a common ground. Because the Red Skull and Baron Zemo, they believe they're patriots in their own way. Magneto versus the X-Men, they're all mutants. Thor versus Loki, God versus God. And for Peter, each of his villains, who for the most part, nearly all of them take after some form of creature. And it's not because they are totems, but instead it's because they've been guided by urges and events outside of their control and beyond their understanding that have led them to embrace an existing totem. And with saying this, Ezekiel goes on to refer to them as pretenders. So from here it clicks in Peter's mind, to an extent, because he at least understands that he was selected and he is the real deal. Which then causes Peter to ask Ezekiel where does he land on the spectrum. And the funny thing is, at the time, Ezekiel did not answer Peter's question. And for a moment we see him think back to the actual answer, though he doesn't verbalize it to Peter. And before this is done, we'll go much deeper into the full answer. But before that, I just want to point out that right here, it was left as a mystery for quite some time. And if I'm not mistaken, for us as the reader, it was like 2.5, 3 years before we got the actual answer. And if you just happen to be watching this video and learning all of this for the first time, lucky for you, because you get it all in one sitting. But instead of Ezekiel telling Peter his story, he just more or less tells Peter that you and I are different, and he leaves it at that. And he goes on to tell Peter that the world is built on a series of checks and balances, life and death, hunters and prey. Take a particular insect out of a bird's environment, the only insect it can feed on, and the bird dies. As he lets Peter know that totemistic forces are the same way, but instead of Peter having to look over his shoulder for a bird, the natural predator of the totems are called the inheritors. As he stares into Peter's soul and tells him, inheritors feed on people like you. And just after this, Ezekiel takes Peter back to his company, WebCorp, and when he does, he admits to Peter that he used his abilities to accumulate the wealth to build this empire. And he lets Peter know that he's surprised that Peter didn't think of using his abilities to more or less do the same thing. So Peter tells him that he did give it a try once, and Ezekiel asks, so what happened? But Peter just pauses for a moment before telling Ezekiel that it's a long story, and what matters is that he learned something that his Uncle Ben taught him. With great power comes great responsibility, which really right here is just a moment of Peter giving Ezekiel a taste of his own medicine, because he notices that this guy's not telling him everything. So Peter decides to do the same. But at this point, with them making their way up to Ezekiel's office, it's here where he shows Peter this safe room that's crazy durable. It's reinforced with adamantium. It has self-containing recycling systems for air and water, and it's stocked with a 4-month food supply. And Ezekiel goes on to let Peter know that he had been working on this safe room for almost 2 years. And in fact, he started working on it before he even knew Peter's identity. And to give Peter a bit more assurance, he tells Peter that he had 6 private investigators look into Spider-Man, all of them working on individual pieces, so that Ezekiel could put all of their findings together just to make sure that he's the only person who knows Peter's secret identity. And he goes on to lay the information on Peter here. He lets him know that he's made this room so that Peter can stay here and lay low so that the inheritor, who goes by the name of Morlun, won't be able to find him. So if everything goes as planned, Peter can lay low here for a couple weeks or so, few weeks or however long he needs to, and hopefully Morlun will get tired of looking and he'll just move on. But Peter turns down this offer, telling Ezekiel that he has to work, he has to teach. So Ezekiel's like, man, I just gave them 100 bands, they should let you take off a week or 2. So then Peter's like, no, I have responsibilities. And right there Ezekiel's like, yeah, great responsibilities, Cause like we saw, Peter gave him the Uncle Ben speech, but the way that Peter sees it, this isn't the first time that somebody's threatened to kill him, and he's pretty sure it won't be the last, so he just leaves, having the mindset of, I'll handle Morlun when the time comes. And after Peter leaves, it isn't long before that time comes, cause after he sees breaking news talking about chaos breaking out on the east side, Peter goes to check it out, only for his spider sense to then go nuts just before he's punched in the face by a hit that he described at the time was harder than the Hulk or Thor had ever hit him, which of course at this point is Peter's introduction to Morlun. And much like he told Ezekiel earlier, Peter tries to handle this by himself, only to get the brakes beat off of him by Morlun. So Peter goes back to Ezekiel, asking for his help, only for Ezekiel to tell him that it's too late, you're going to die, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it. Nothing. Because once you've been touched by an inheritor, they can track you anywhere you go. So now there's not even any point of having the safe room, because Morlun can track Peter there too. But also I do need to mention here that about 10 years after this whole story completed, during the original Sin event, Orb used one of the Watcher's eyes to reveal a ton of secrets, which at the time showed us that Ezekiel Sims had more than one of these safe rooms, which apparently was much better than Peter's, with it lasting 10-11 years, as opposed to the 4 months of food that Peter had. But nonetheless, the story we're talking about now, this is what was used to introduce Cindy Moon, who's also known as Silk, with it being said later on that Ezekiel Sims locked her away as well. But getting back into the story, as it stands right now, with Ezekiel telling Peter that there's nothing he can do for him, Peter ends up making his way back to Morlun. Because right now, Morlun is continuing to put innocent lives in danger. So for Peter, it's not like he wanted to rush towards what's looking to be a death sentence, but instead it's more like he feels responsible for the innocent lives that Morlun would take if Peter didn't come back. But this time when Peter faces Morlun, Ezekiel steps in, and right away Morlun recognizes that Ezekiel is not pure like Spider-Man, which again, we'll talk about more towards the end of this. But for Morlun, he tells Ezekiel that he's not too concerned about it, because he'll feed on him just the same. But as Peter and Ezekiel team up on him, Peter's thinking to himself how this is a new experience for him, fighting alongside of someone who has the same instincts, the same movements, who's practically an older version of himself, which again goes back to that one-to-one thing I mentioned earlier. And I want you guys to keep that in mind, especially as we get to the end of this video. But with how this plays out, Morlun grabs Ezekiel's hair, he pulls him back and he starts to feed on him, but Peter's able to get him off of Ezekiel just in time. And with how it was done, it was also kind of set up to make it look like Ezekiel died as he fell into the water, only for us later to find out when Ezekiel fell into that water, that man swam for his life because he was out of there. And Peter went in after him, holding his breath for over 20 minutes, looking and searching. But when Peter comes up, he realizes that Ezekiel's help gave him an idea, because since Ezekiel made Morlun bleed, Peter now had a sample of his blood, so he can analyze it and see what he was up against. Which for Peter, this just confirmed everything Ezekiel said about Morlun being an inheritor, because his DNA was an amalgam of every kind of cell, animal, bird, human, insect, which not only confirmed for Peter that Morlun was feeding on other totems, but it also gave Peter the idea of making his way down to the southern New York nuclear plant so that Peter could use the basis of that big question that Ezekiel asked him about that radioactive spider that bit him, because it's here where Peter injects himself with just enough radioactive material that it doesn't kill him, so that theoretically, when Morlun finds him and tries to feed on Peter, he'll absorb more of that radioactivity first. And it's a risky plan, because just before Peter passes out, he's like, man, I don't know if this was a great idea or if I just killed myself. But it ends up working, because after Morlun tracks down Peter, he tries to feed on him and he ends up absorbing much of the radiation, which then allows Peter to recover and take Morlun down, with a bit of help from Dex, who was helping Morlun out this whole time. But after this, Peter eventually figured out that Ezekiel was still alive, which was given away by a number of clues, fake robot spider, footprints on the window. So eventually Peter put the clues together and he figured it out, which from here then takes us forward 10 issues to Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2, Issue 46, where at this point Peter was confronted by the totemic spider deity, Shathra, who put the hurt on Peter pretty bad. And it was here where Ezekiel Sims came out of hiding to help Peter by taking him to Ghana so he could recover, and soon after prepare a trap so that the next time Shathra came back, Peter could defeat her. But it was after this when Ezekiel informed Peter about important things always coming in threes. Morlun was the first, Shathra was the second, and the two of them were only appetizers. Which from here now takes us to the point where we jump forward to the Amazing Spider-Man issue 506, which is not really like a 3-year gap, it's closer to 2, but it's here where Ezekiel came back, because at this time he found himself in desperate need of returning to the Spider Temple to tell the Keeper that he's burning up and he needs his help, which the Keeper reluctantly agreed to do, but only with letting Ezekiel know that this is the last time that he can help him, because when the last test takes place, and the sacrifice has to be given, if Ezekiel comes back, one of the two of them will die. So again, the Keeper's like, this is the last time I'm gonna help you, which then has Ezekiel like, I'll do what I have to. He'll help me. I've worked hard to make sure of it. To where from here, we see Ezekiel go back to Peter, where at this point between the two of them, in comic book time, it's been a little under a year. So at first, they chop it up for a bit, Peter invites Ezekiel over for dinner, and there's also this moment here just before Peter and Ezekiel leave, where Ezekiel says something to MJ that I kind of feel like is going to be portrayed in a way in his character in the film, because after seeing a theater directory that MJ had thrown in the trash, that had the words "Don't be stupid" written on it, Ezekiel tells MJ that he does know a few things about destiny and about power. We have as much power as we choose to have, and I have the power to see things. Things that happen. I see you on the stage. I see you before an audience. I see your every doubt removed forever, which I think in the film will be a more prominent aspect, because I assume movie Ezekiel will be able to see both things that will happen and things that have happened. But from here, he then asks Peter to take a walk with him, so they can have a talk between the two of them, as he points out to Peter that over the past year, most of his battles have been with supernatural forces, and he tells Peter because of the way that he got his power, it circumvented the traditions of the supernatural channels. So for that reason, the next battle that he must face is going to be with the Gatekeeper, who watches over those channels to make sure that not just anyone gets by, but from time to time some do. And Ezekiel lets Peter know if the Gatekeeper noticed, they'll be coming for him. So, lo and behold, not too long after, here comes the Gatekeeper, and it came through in the form of literally millions of spiders. But when this happened, it was here when things started to take quite the turn, because when Peter went up against the Gatekeeper, he was completely overwhelmed and completely consumed in spiders, but only because the Gatekeeper wanted to speak to Peter and show him the truth. With the truth being that the way that Peter got his powers, it happened the way that it was supposed to happen, and he truly was chosen. But Ezekiel, on the other hand, he's a pretender, and he had stolen this power that he's not supposed to have, which from here caused Peter to realize that Ezekiel had been using him this whole time, and the supernatural forces that Peter fought, he had been fighting them on Ezekiel's behalf, because this whole time they're supposed to go after him, not Peter. But as Peter wakes up and regains his consciousness, he finds himself in South America with Ezekiel, and now with Peter knowing Ezekiel's true intentions, including the part about the sacrifice, from here these two go at it. But in what really should be a stalemate, with their abilities being one-to-one, and their spider senses not working on each other because they're both a child of the spider, eventually Ezekiel gets the upper hand when he injects Peter with a neurotoxin that takes a little while to settle in. But before it does, the two of them are evenly matched, hit for hit, blow for blow. But after it kicks in, Ezekiel overpowers Peter. He knocks him out, only for Peter to wake up in the temple, bound to a pillar and prepared to be the sacrifice. So Ezekiel cuts himself and Peter, so that when the powers come for Ezekiel's blood, they'll find it here with Peter and kill him, allowing Ezekiel to walk away, a free man, no longer having to look over his shoulder. But as Ezekiel walks away and Peter's getting ready to be sacrificed, Ezekiel gets a bit of a surprise as a byproduct of stealing from the Chosen One's power. Because right here, Peter's spider sense goes crazy, as both him and Ezekiel both see each other's life flash before the other's eyes. And it's a wild thing because you can see just in comparison that Peter has been through so much more. But on Ezekiel's side, we find out that he wanted this power. He wanted the power of the totem so that he could use it to help people. But even when he got it, he was just too busy and he never got around to it. And for Ezekiel, that day just never came. And on Peter's end, he lost so much more. But all Peter would think about is the lesson he learned from Uncle Ben, protecting the people who depended on him, and never giving up. Which for Ezekiel, after seeing this, he raced right back inside the temple, freed Peter from his constraints, while begging the powers to take him instead, screaming, "Get away from him. It's me you want. I'm the one who never did a damn thing with my life. Not him. Leave him alone. You want to take somebody? Take me. Take me." And that is exactly what happens. Woo, man. And the crazy thing is, just after Ezekiel's killed, Peter, he passes out, because like we saw, he's been through it. But the crazy thing that happens here, it's that the keeper of the temple was watching this whole time from the shadows. And I'm talking about the same guy who said, "Ezekiel, don't you come back," because he wasn't going to help him no more. And I don't know, I just found it funny that he was quiet the whole time. But also we get a moment here that's really profound, because for a moment the Keeper tells Peter that Ezekiel always had the power to change the world, long before he even came to the temple. Because before, it's not that he didn't have enough power or enough influence or enough money, he just made a lot of the wrong decisions. Which in a way kind of reminds me of that movie Blow with Johnny Depp, where if I remember correctly, he showed his dad like the insane amount of money that he had made. And he asked his dad something like, "Aren't you proud of me? I'm not good at this, I'm great." And his dad just looked at him and said, "Son, you would have been great at anything." And it just kind of feels like the same moral of the story's going on here. Because if you think about it, Ezekiel accomplished everything that he put his mind to, but it wasn't until the very end where he finally made the right decision, which at that point cost him everything. But the last thing we see here is a conversation between Peter and the Keeper, where Peter looks to get a bit more of an understanding about this whole totem thing. So he asks the Keeper, "Is this truly magic or is it science?" And the Keeper just tells him, "Tomorrow the sun will come up. Can you tell me all the reasons of science that it does come up? All the orbital mechanics and all the laws of thermodynamics? Because all I can say is that it will come up because it's meant to come up. I see no contradiction. Do you?" And Peter says no, because he sees no contradiction either, which really just ends this with the answer of magic just being science that can't be explained, which at the time was a really good ending to a story that I enjoyed a lot. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.